The life and legacy of Raila Amollo Odinga. It was on the 7th of January, 1945, in the small town of Maseno, in what was then the Kisumu district of Nyanza province, that a boy was born to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Mary Juma Odinga. The couple named him Raila Amollo Odinga, a name that would, in the decades to come, echo in every corner of Kenya and far beyond. Raila was born into a family already destined for public life. His father, Jaramogi, was not only a respected teacher and freedom fighter but also a visionary nationalist who would later become Kenya's first vice president. From his father, young Raila inherited a deep sense of justice, courage, and political awareness. From his mother, he drew humility, discipline, and compassion, values that would guide him through the turbulence of his life. Growing up in post-war colonial Kenya, Raila's childhood was shaped by both opportunity and oppression. His father's involvement in politics exposed him early to the struggles for independence and equality. While other children of his age played carefree, Raila listened to adults debate about freedom, self-governance, and the future of their people. Those moments planted the first seeds of activism in his young heart. Education and early career. Raila's formal education began at Kisumu Union Primary School, followed by Maranda Primary and later Maranda High School, where his academic brilliance began to show. He was curious, outspoken, and meticulous, the kind of student who always sought to understand how things worked. It was no surprise, then, that his interest turned toward engineering, a field that combined both logic and creation. In the early 1960s, as Kenya inched closer to independence, Raila earned a scholarship to study in East Germany, then part of the Socialist bloc. He attended the Herder Institute at the University of Leipzig for language preparation, and later the Technical School of Magdeburg, where he specialized in mechanical engineering and welding. The years in East Germany broadened his worldview. He lived in a nation rebuilding from war, witnessing the power of organization, discipline, and industrial progress. He also experienced socialism firsthand, a system that emphasized equality, collective responsibility, and the empowerment of workers. Those ideas deeply influenced his later political philosophy. When he returned to Kenya in 1970, he was not just a young engineer, he was a man who carried within him the dreams of a modern nation. He took up employment at the University of Nairobi as a lecturer and later joined the Kenya Bureau of Standards, KEBS, where he rose to the position of deputy director. Around the same time, he founded East African Spectre Limited, a company that manufactured liquid petroleum gas cylinders, one of the first Kenyan-owned industries of its kind. Family life. In 1973, Raila married Ida Enyango Ayu, a young, intelligent teacher from Luo Nyanza. Their marriage was not only a union of love but also of shared purpose and resilience. Together, they raised 4 children, Fidel, Rosemary, Raila Jr., and Winnie. Ida became his lifelong partner and confidant, standing by him through arrests, detentions, and political storms that few families could have endured. Political awakening and detentions. By the late 1970s, Kenya had entered a difficult political era. The first president, Jomo Kenyatta, had died in 1978 and Daniel Arap Moi had taken over. What began as a hopeful transition soon hardened into authoritarian rule. Political dissent was criminalized, and the dream of democracy seemed to fade. Raila, inspired by his father's courage, began to question the injustices he saw around him. He joined underground political movements that demanded multi-party democracy, fair governance, and the end of political repression. In 1982, Kenya faced a coup attempt against President Moi's regime. The government accused Raila of involvement in planning the coup, allegations he denied. Yet, he was arrested and detained without trial for nearly 6 years, from 1982 to 1988. Those years in prison were brutal. He was isolated, interrogated, and denied access to his family. Ida struggled to raise their children alone, facing harassment from the state. But Raila's spirit was never broken. In his later writings, he recalled that his time in detention only strengthened his resolve. He used the solitude to reflect on leadership, justice, and the cost of freedom. He was released in 1988, but his freedom was short-lived. For his continued calls for democracy, he was detained again in 1989, and once more in 1990, spending a total of 8 years in political detention. The struggle for multi-party democracy. When Raila finally walked free in 1991, Kenya was at a crossroads. Pressure from activists, churches, and foreign governments had forced President Moi to repeal Section 2A of the Constitution, allowing the return of multi-party politics. Raila immediately joined the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD, a coalition led by his father, Jaramogi. However, internal rivalries soon split the movement into factions, and Raila aligned with FORD Kenya. After Jaramogi's death in 1994, Raila continued his father's legacy, emerging as one of the most vocal and fearless opposition figures of his generation. In 1997, Raila contested the presidency for the first time under the National Development Party, NDP. Although he did not win, his campaign energized millions of Kenyans, especially the youth, and established him as a force to reckon with. The road to power. By 2002, Kenya was hungry for change. After 24 years of Moi's rule, a broad coalition of opposition parties united under the National Rainbow Coalition, NARC, led by Mwai Kibaki. Raila played a critical role in uniting the opposition. His famous declaration, Kibaki Tosha, became the rallying cry that brought NARC to victory. When Kibaki became president, Raila expected to see the coalition's reform agenda implemented. However, disagreements soon arose, especially over constitutional reforms. In 2005, a national referendum on the proposed constitution divided the government. Raila led the No campaign under the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, symbolized by the orange fruit. The ODM's victory in that referendum turned Raila into the de facto leader of the opposition once again. The 2007 election and the coalition government. In 2007, Raila contested the presidency against the incumbent, Mwai Kibaki. The election was one of the most hotly contested in Kenya's history. When the Electoral Commission declared Kibaki the winner, Raila's supporters cried foul, alleging massive rigging. The country descended into post-election violence that left over 1,000 people dead and hundreds of thousands displaced. Amid the chaos, international mediators led by Kofi Annan brokered a peace deal. A coalition government was formed in 2008, with Mwai Kibaki as president and Raila Odinga as prime minister, the first and only such position in Kenya's history. During his tenure as prime minister, Raila focused on infrastructure development, institutional reforms, and the fight against corruption. His greatest achievement in that period was the passage of the 2010 Constitution, a transformative document that introduced devolution, a Bill of Rights, and checks on executive power. In 2013, Raila made his third bid for the presidency under ODM but lost to Uhuru Kenyatta. He again challenged the results in court but accepted the ruling, emphasizing peace and national unity. In 2017, he ran once more against Kenyatta. The Supreme Court later annulled the election results, a historic first in Africa, citing irregularities. However, after the repeat election, which he boycotted, tensions escalated. In a dramatic turn, on January 30, 2018, Raila symbolically swore himself in as the people's president, a move that electrified his supporters but also deepened political divisions. A few months later, he shocked the nation again when he appeared hand-in-hand with President Kenyatta on the steps of Harambee House, announcing what came to be known as the handshake, a truce meant to unite the country and promote reconciliation. In 2022, Raila made what would be his fifth and final run for the presidency, this time under the Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya alliance. Despite the support of the sitting president, he narrowly lost to William Ruto. He accepted the results reluctantly but maintained his stance as the moral voice of the opposition, advocating for electoral justice, economic reform, and unity. Achievements and legacy. Raila Odinga's political life was defined by persistence. For over 5 decades, he fought for democracy, equality, and justice, often at great personal cost. He endured imprisonment, political persecution, and electoral defeats, yet remained steadfast in his belief that Kenya deserved better. His role in the Second Liberation, which ended one-party rule, earned him a place among Africa's great democrats. His contribution to the 2010 constitution reshaped Kenya's political landscape permanently. Beyond politics, Raila was an engineer, a businessman, and a Pan-Africanist who believed in regional unity and African Renaissance. He also served as the African Union High Representative for Infrastructure Development, championing connectivity across the continent. Family, personal life, and character. Those close to Raila describe him as warm, humorous, and unshakably patient. He loved football and was a lifelong supporter of Gor Mahia Football Club. He also enjoyed traditional Luo music and storytelling. Despite his busy political life, he valued family deeply. Ida stood by his side for over 50 years, and their children carried on his values of service and resilience. The loss of his eldest son, Fidel Odinga, in 2015 was one of the most painful moments of his life. Yet, even in grief, he remained composed, showing the same endurance that had defined his political journey. Final days and passing. In his later years, Raila continued to advocate for good governance and Pan-African unity. He frequently traveled abroad for official engagements and medical checkups. On October 15, 2025, while undergoing treatment at an Ayurvedic hospital in Kochi, India, Raila Amollo Odinga passed away from cardiac arrest during his morning walk. He was 80 years old. The news sent shockwaves across Kenya and the African continent. Tributes poured in from presidents, diplomats, and citizens alike. Streets and homes were filled with sorrowful songs and candles. For many, it felt like the passing of not just a man, but an era, the end of Kenya's liberation generation. His body was flown back home to Nairobi, where he was accorded state honors. Tens of thousands gathered to bid farewell at leaders and ordinary citizens, friends, and former rivals, all united in mourning and respect. At his burial in Bondo, Siaya County, speakers described him as a man who never gave up, who fought for what he believed in, and who remained true to his people until his last breath. Conclusion: the man, the movement, the legacy. Raila Amollo Odinga's life was a long, winding road, marked by sacrifice, courage, and unyielding faith in the power of the people. He was never just a politician, he was a teacher, a freedom fighter, and a father to a nation in constant pursuit of justice. Though he never sat in State House as president, his influence on Kenya's political history is immeasurable. His story is the story of Kenya itself, of hope, struggle, betrayal, and renewal. As the sun set on that October day in 2025, Kenya bid farewell to its Baba, a man who spent 80 years walking alongside his people, dreaming of a country that was fair, free, and united. And in the hearts of millions, Raila Amollo Odinga will forever remain the people's president. It was a humid morning in Kochi, India, on the 15th of October, 2025. The sun had just begun to rise over the Arabian Sea when Raila Amollo Odinga prepared for his routine morning walk at the Ayurvedic hospital where he was receiving treatment. Those who saw him that morning said he looked peaceful, smiling faintly, as though reflecting on a long, eventful life. Moments later he collapsed and was pronounced dead of cardiac arrest at the age of 80. News of his death spread across Kenya and beyond, plunging the nation into mourning. To understand the weight of that moment, one must go back to the beginning. Raila Amollo Odinga was born on January 7, 1945 in Maseno, then part of Kisumu district in Nyanza province, Kenya. His father, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, a teacher turned nationalist leader, and his mother, Mary Juma Odinga, raised him in a household steeped in the ideals of justice, equality, and African self-rule. From an early age, Raila learned that truth was worth fighting for, that leadership was service, and that ordinary people had the power to change their destiny. As a boy in colonial Kenya, he attended Kisumu Union Primary School, went on to Maranda Primary, and Maranda High School, where his inquisitive nature stood out. He asked why of many things, questioned injustices he saw, and developed an interest in how machines worked and systems operated. In the early 1960s he earned a scholarship to study in East Germany, the German Democratic Republic. He attended the Herder Institute in Leipzig, then the Technical School of Magdeburg, where he studied mechanical engineering and welding. His time in Germany exposed him to a society rebuilding from war, to disciplined industrial systems and collective effort, and also the dangers of oppression and surveillance, lessons he carried back home. Returning to Kenya in 1970, Odinga began his professional career as a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, before joining the Kenya Bureau of Standards, KBS, rising to the position of deputy director. He also founded East African Spectre Limited, a manufacturing company producing LPG cylinders, one of the early Kenyan-owned industrial enterprises. In 1973 he married Ida Enyango Ayu, a teacher from Nyanza. Their marriage became a partnership of purpose and resilience. They had 4 children, Fidel, Rosemary, Raila Jr. and Winnie. Ida stood by him through years of sacrifice that few families endure. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Kenya's political climate had grown increasingly repressive under President Daniel Arap Moi. The one-party system stifled dissent, and the young engineer-turned-activist began to align with underground movements pressing for democracy. In August 1982 came a turning point. A coup attempt rocked Kenya. Odinga was accused of involvement, though he denied planning violence. He was arrested and detained without trial, beginning a period of 6 years of imprisonment from 1982 to 1988. He was later detained again in 1989 and 1990. In total he spent 8 years behind bars, enduring harsh isolation, interrogation and separation from his family. Yet he emerged not as a broken man but as a symbol of resilience. Upon his release, the winds of change were blowing across Africa. In 1991 Kenya repealed Section 2A of its constitution and restored multi-party politics. Odinga joined the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD, founded by his father. After Jaramogi's death in 1994, Raila carried the torch forward, forming the National Development Party, NDP. In 1997 he launched his first presidential bid under NDP. Though he did not win, his campaign galvanized urban youth, rural voters, and the displaced. He had become a national figure. In 2002, Kenya's appetite for change culminated in the victory of the National Rainbow Coalition, NARC. Odinga played a key role in uniting opposition parties and rallied behind Mwai Kibaki with the slogan Kibaki Tosha, meaning Kibaki is the one. The election ended 24 years of Moi's rule and opened an era of hope. Although Raila did not become president, his role in the transition was pivotal. Yet coalition politics proved fragile. In 2005 a proposed constitution sparked a referendum. Odinga led the "Eno" campaign under the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, symbolized by an orange. The Eno side won, and ODM emerged as a significant force with Odinga at its helm. In 2007 he contested the presidency again, this time under ODM. The election was fiercely contested, the result declared in favor of Kibaki was widely disputed, and Kenya plunged into deadly post-election violence that claimed over 1,000 lives and displaced hundreds of thousands. Under mediation by Kofi Annan, in 2008 a coalition government was formed with Kibaki as president and Raila Odinga as prime minister, the only person to hold that office in Kenya's history. During his tenure, 2008 to 2013, he focused on infrastructure, governance reforms, and played a central role in delivering the 2010 Constitution, which introduced devolution, a Bill of Rights and more robust checks and balances. In 2013 he ran again for president, lost narrowly to Uhuru Kenyatta, challenged the result in court, and accepted the ruling. In 2017 he made his 5th presidential bid. The Supreme Court annulled the election, a first in Africa, citing irregularities, but the repeat election, which Odinga boycotted, was still held and he again fell short. In January 2018, Odinga swore himself in as People's President in a controversial act of defiance. Later that year he shook hands with his longtime rival, Uhuru Kenyatta, the infamous handshake that signaled a new era of political rapprochement. Beyond Kenya, Odinga's influence extended across the continent. He served as the African Union High Representative for Infrastructure Development, championing Pan-African connectivity, rail, energy, and port links, believing strongly that Africa's redemption lay in linked economies and common purpose. In 2022, at age 77, he ran for president under the Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya alliance. He lost to William Ruto but earned respect for conceding with dignity and emphasizing national unity. In the later years of his life he balanced public engagements with quieter moments at home in Karen, Nairobi, and with family in Siaya. On the morning of October 15, 2025, while being treated in India and taking his customary walk, he suffered cardiac arrest and passed away at age 80. Kenya declared 7 days of national mourning, the flag flew at half-mast, and a state funeral with full military honors was announced. Thousands gathered at the airport, in stadium viewings and at his hometown of Bondo to pay final respects. Tragically, several people died in the crowds and stampedes while the nation mourned. Raila Odinga lived a life defined by struggle, purpose, and unwavering belief that Kenya could be better. He was never president, yet he became something greater, a conscience, a compass, a symbol of hope, a father figure to millions. When the sun set on that October day, Kenya lost one of its greatest sons. Yet his voice, the voice that called for justice, still echoes. His dream of a united, free, prosperous Kenya still lives in the hearts of his people. In his passing, the movement continues. In his absence, the challenge remains. Raila Amollo Odinga is gone, but his legacy endures.